Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking another deep dive into this Auburn Tigers program with our focus now in the transfer portal, talking about some positions, some players that Auburn still could be going after as this transfer portal cycle continues to play out. Now, I think what you saw was Hugh Freeze, this Auburn Tigers program, really attacking that high school recruiting class extremely hard in the early December month. And you saw Hugh Freeze. I mean, this staff knocked it out of the park. We've kind of broken down that 2024 class, a phenomenal class. Now you have those guys signed. Now your attention is kind of rounding out this team in the transfer portal heading into that 2024 year. Got some players, some positions that I think Auburn should take a look at. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys. A shout out to the Auburn fans. This has been a program that since Hugh Freeze has taken this job, has been just an absolute blast to cover. I mean, Hugh Freeze making some massive splashes on the recruiting trail. We've had a blast doing it. The amount of support you guys have shown has been absolutely amazing. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment sections. Players, position groups you think Auburn should be going after. Hope you guys are having a phenomenal Christmas. Without further ado, let's get into this Auburn Tigers program. And I want to start with this offensive line, a position group, I should say, that Hugh Freeze has been pretty vocal in saying we want to add some bodies to this offensive line. Few names that I still like in the portal, and this is kind of why we talk about recruiting the offensive line at a high level, because it is hard to go out and get proven players that can come into an SEC team and start in the transfer portal. Now, you do have one here in Michael Tarkin, who started his career at Florida, played really well in 2022. You go back and look at the numbers, only gave up 5 pressures. So he's proven that he can play at a high level at that right tackle spot in the SEC. He goes over to USC, struggles with some injuries. I think his play might have dipped a little bit, gave up 13 pressures. Definitely wasn't as good as what we saw at Florida. That being said, I'm not selling stock in Michael Tarkin being a starting caliber offensive lineman in the SEC. And at the end of the day, it's rare to find guys that have that much playing experience at the SEC level. Michael Tarkin checks that box. It sounds like he wants to come back to the SEC after playing 1 year at USC in 2023. I think this would be a really good get. And I think he's a guy that could play guard as well and kind of be a utility piece on this offensive line. Michael Tarkin, I think, would come in. I don't necessarily know if he's a lock to start for this Auburn program, but excuse me, a guy that you bring into this roster, you bring into this offensive line group, and you kind of feel good about where it's at from a depth standpoint if you add a guy with the experience and the talent level of Michael Tarkin. Another guy that's on my radar, and this took me a while, like taking deep dives into the players that were available at the offensive line position, or I should say still available on that offensive line. A guy that I liked and kind of buzzed some film on him, really like his game. And again, Auburn had a lot of success going out and getting Gunnar Britton from Western Kentucky last year. Quantavious Leslie, an interior offensive lineman, plays that guard spot. This dude's a road grader, and he can pass pro too. I mean, 6'3", 318 pounds. You look at him, he has the body to play in the SEC. Extremely powerful hands, just a powerful human being, quite frankly, on that inside of the offensive line. And then you take a look at him in pass protection. This is a Western Kentucky team that throws the football a lot. It was at 13 pass blocking snaps in 2023, only gave up 10 pressures. So you're getting a guy that I think adds a lot of play strength in terms of running the football. I mean, he moves bodies, gets up to the second level really well, but also somebody that kind of checks that box in terms of pass protection as well. And again, I think Auburn wants to bring in 2 offensive linemen. You get a guy like Michael Tarkin, a proven SEC tackle, and then you go and get a guy on the interior offensive line in Quintavious Leslie, who I think could be a plug-and-play guy at the SEC level as well. But at the very least, it sounds like Auburn maybe feels good about their starting 5. But you want as many bodies as you can, capable bodies, I should say, on that offensive line. If you have injuries, you have to reshuffle. A guy like Tarkin, a guy like Quintavious Leslie, those are probably 2 of my favorite targets for Auburn in the transfer portal if they do, in fact, want to go bolster up that offensive line, which, again, Hugh Freeze has said he wants to bring in a few guys who kind of are proven at that offensive line position. Now, the next position group we've been talking about a lot, and it sounds like Auburn is very interested in this guy, LaJohntay Wester, coming over from FAU, kind of an undersized wide receiver, but electric with the football in his hands and the proven production. You can't really argue. Now, this is an FAU team that wasn't exactly the most prolific offense, but when good things were happening with FAU, I mean, Wester had the football in his hands. You look at his career numbers, and this is kind of what you're selling here. 252 catches for over 2,700 yards, 21 touchdowns, also has 36 carries for over 220 yards. This is a guy that you want playmakers in this Auburn offense. I think LeJontay Wester, should be a guy that kind of provides that experience in the wide receiver room, that production in the wide receiver room, but another dynamic weapon that you get him the football in space. He's a guy that had over 550 yards after the catch at FAU in 2023. Hugh Freeze is looking for these guys that you can get the football to in space and good things are going to happen. I think Wester certainly resembles that and kind of balances out what you're bringing in this 2024 class with a guy like Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman, who are probably going to be elite boundary receivers, whether it's freshmen or whether it's year two. You can bring in a guy like LeJontay Wester, who has the proven production, is electric after the catch, really good with the football in space. I think this would be a really good fit in this Auburn offense. Now, the next two positions I'm looking at, one is that defensive back room, right? When you lose a guy like it was a good group. It was a talented group, but a lot of those guys are going to the NFL. Now, getting Keontae Scott back, I think, is absolutely massive. I think he is one of the better defensive backs in the SEC. But you're losing DJ James, Simpson, Pritchett, Puckett. Those are guys that played a lot of football for Auburn the last couple of years. You probably want to go out and add some names in that defensive backfield. And a guy that is heating up for Auburn, and I would be such a massive fan to bring in a guy like this, A.J. Harris, former five-star from that 2023 class. Now, played his high school ball with Cam Coleman at Central in Phoenix City, Alabama. So I think you have some connections there. And at the end of the day, A.J. Harris did not play a ton for Georgia as a true freshman, but you look at that Georgia secondary room. I mean, it was absolutely loaded. A lot of those guys are NFL caliber guys, so I'm not necessarily selling A.J. Harris because he didn't get on the football field as a true freshman for the University of Georgia. But as a guy at Auburn, going into a second year of college football, having that body right, I think would make a ton of sense. And you go back to him coming out of high school, a guy that we talked a lot about, kind of a box checker, 6'1", 195 pounds. He runs an 11-second 100 meters. So he has the frame, he has the long speed, he has the movement skills. I mean, there was a reason he was a five-star coming out of the high school ranks. And I think you still have that five-star athlete. Now you bring him into Auburn, and he has an opportunity to play a lot of football as a second-year guy in college football. It's a position group that I think is losing a lot of experience. I think the best way you can supplement and kind of maybe bridge that gap is bringing in a guy like A.J. Harris, who has a ton of talent and arguably might be the most talented guy in this defensive backfield for the Auburn Tigers heading into that 2024 season. In the last position I want to take a look at, and this you might have to wait to see. When a guy like Justin Rogers still undecided on going to the NFL, I still think Auburn is putting a lot of emphasis on the defensive line. And this is something we've talked about. As much as Hugh Freeze and people want to talk about what Auburn is doing, getting those playmakers on offense, right? Perry Thompson, Cam Coleman, Bryce Kane, trying to go after a guy like Ryan Williams. Hugh Freeze has done a phenomenal job building this defensive line. I'm a huge fan of what they have coming in 2024, but you take a sneak peek to 2025. Again, Auburn fans that have been listening to me know I'm very fired up about what they're doing along the line of scrimmage. Hugh Freeze wants to get this defensive line right. And a guy like Jamari Caldwell coming over from Houston is that big physical presence on the inside that I think Auburn wants. Now, Jamari Caldwell is not necessarily a stat stuffer. He's not a guy that's going to finish the season with 15 TFLs and 12 sacks, but he's a guy that elevates the defense, but not on the stat sheet. Taking on double teams, holding up line, allowing those linebackers to kind of play clean, taking 2 blocks in the pass rush. He's extremely powerful. I mean, 6'1", 325, that kind of tells you the body type we're talking about. He takes on double teams well. He wins at the point of attack. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to penetrate and make a ton of negative plays, but you look at a lot of the top defenses across the country. Georgia has guys like this. Michigan has guys like this who aren't necessarily lighting up the stat sheet, but are making and elevating the level of this defense. So Jamari Caldwell, not the flashiest player, but man, when you turn on the film, you can see the physical dominance that he has. And coming from Houston, doing it at the Big 12 level, you kind of feel better about Jamari Caldwell showing that he can do it at the Power 5 level and making that jump to Auburn. I love Jamari Caldwell. He's a guy that's not getting a ton of talk about because he wasn't a massive prospect coming out of high school. He's not a guy that has 15 and a half TFLs coming out of it that 2023 season, but a guy that's going to elevate this defense. And I think would make a lot of sense because Hugh Freeze wants to get this defensive line right. Jamari Caldwell, depth, talent, I think would add to this Auburn defensive line. And you look at Auburn heading into this 2024 year, you're feeling pretty good. Like from a talent standpoint, you see this ship going in the right direction. Are they going to win an SEC championship in 2024? I don't know if they're necessarily the favorite, but you start projecting and looking at 2025 and then 2026 with Kozlik, Walker White, Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, you start feeling good about the steps this Auburn program is making. And Hugh Freeze, come 2 years from now, he's going to have this team one of the more talented teams in the SEC. And that's how you start competing for SEC championships. Really excited about this program. Really excited to see what they do in the transfer portal. Because I do think you'll probably see Hugh Freeze get pretty aggressive over the next couple of weeks. Again, I think his attention was fully on closing out that high school class. And now his attention focused on the transfer portal. We'll be breaking down the roster moves again. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Hope you guys all have a phenomenal Christmas, New Year's, and we'll talk to y'all later.